Tom, if you want to just come to my house and play me to sleep every night, I would love that. It'd be great. I'm not a boomer, so I'm going to be doing everything off of a screen. Hope that's okay with all the boomers in the house. There's a moment where you know you've messed up, right? Not just in the, whoops, I forgot to send the email, a way that sticks to you, a way that makes you want to avoid the mirror, a way that makes your stomach drop. When I was in 6th grade, I moved to Texas. Americans who lived near our neighborhood, lived near our community, lived outside. My birthday came along in 6th grade, and I invited the prejudiced system in which I grew up on me. And I spent the next 3 and 4 years of my life trying to undo that mess that I had invited in. Jason and I are good now. See, sin is not just a moral failure. It's a rupture in relationship. It's not simply breaking a rule. It's breaking trust. It's breaching communion. It's breaking relationship. Sin is anything that distances us from God and from others, and even distances us from ourselves. It isn't simply what we do. Sometimes it's what we refuse to do. The failure to bother to love. It could have been a word spoken in anger, a choice made in selfishness, an opportunity to love that we let pass by. And when you're in that moment and the realization hits, when the weight settles in, what happens next? That's the question, isn't it? And if we're honest, that's the moment we fear, because we know how people work. We live in a world where failures stick to us like Velcro, where mistakes define us, where people are not always great at letting things go, especially the church. So the question is, what does love do in this moment? Right? We've been taking you on a journey this Lenten season. We started with understanding sin as this failure to bother, to love. And then we talked about what happens when sin gets implanted in our systems. And then we become complicit just in the way that we exist in our life. And then Mike brought us last week to what is the crux of when sin meets the presence of God. And we said it is love, and love begins to disrupt harm. And so we go from this disruption of harm into what does love look like and do? And this is where grace comes in. There's this dinner party in Luke chapter 7. It's one of my favorite stories from the Bible. And if you pay attention, you can almost hear the silverware clinking, the quiet hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter from the important people at the table. And then her. A woman walks in. We don't know her name. We don't even know her story. But we know who she is, and at least we know what they call her. Sinner. This label follows her like a shadow, a Velcro shadow that's connected to every part of her. And it's spoken in whispers behind their cupped hands. Oh, here comes the sinner. And she steps forward and she breaks every rule of social decorum. She moves toward Jesus, and suddenly this atmosphere begins to shift at the party because now this moment is happening. And she's weeping. And she kneels down at the feet of Jesus, and she breaks open perfume, and she pours it on his feet, and then she mixes her tears and the perfume and starts to wipe Jesus' feet with her hair. Hair that's supposed to be tied up and put back. It is scandalous. It's uncomfortable. Right? It's that party that you will never not talk about. And there's this guy at the table who's a lot like us. His name's Simon the Pharisee, and you can see the judgment on his face. If this man were a prophet, he says, he'd know who she is, what she's done, the weight she carries. Because that's how the world works, right? You do wrong, and you wear it. You carry it. You stuff it in your proverbial backpack. You live with it. That's the deal, the world tells us. But then Jesus does what Jesus does. He reorients the moment. He tells Simon a story about two people who owed money. One owed a little, and one owed a whole lot. And both debts in Luke's story are canceled. Which one, Jesus asks to Simon, do you think would love more? And Simon knows the answer. He says, well, the bigger the forgiveness, the bigger the love. And it's in that moment that Jesus turns to the woman and he says, your sins are forgiven. Just like that. No conditions, no hoops to jump through. No, you got to tie your hair back before you're free. And the weight of all that this woman has been carrying is gone. That's what grace does. See, sin wounds, but grace heals. Sin isolates, but grace restores. Sin enslaves, but grace frees. Grace isn't fairness. It's not karma. Grace isn't you get what you deserve. Grace is ridiculous. It doesn't balance the scales. It throws the scales out the window. Think about the parable of the unforgiving servant that was read this morning. A man owes a ridiculous debt, lifetime of wages. The kind of number that you won't even try to pay back because you know it's impossible. And the king, he forgives it. He wipes it away. Can you imagine the freedom, the relief that was felt in that moment? But then this same man finds someone who owes him money, a much smaller debt. And instead of passing on mercy that he just received, he chokes the guy out and throws him in prison. Because that's how the world works. A world where debt stays and sin defines, where people hold on to things because letting go feels too much like losing something. But grace works differently. Grace isn't fair. It's better. Grace is this unearned, undeserved, unrelenting love of God that refuses to allow sin to have the last word. Grace is not just a pardon. It is not just a cosmic, it's okay. It's an invitation. It calls us into something new. It doesn't ignore what's been done, but it refuses to let it be the end of the story. It's why Jesus looked at the woman at the dinner party and didn't just erase her past, he rewrote her future. See, the thing about grace is it moves. It doesn't just stay on a page, it flows. Think about water that fills the open space it's given. It works its way into the cracks. It smooths the jagged edges over time. Grace is like that. It moves into places that we're ashamed of. It seeps into the cracks of our failures. It doesn't ignore our brokenness. It heals it. But here's the catch. Grace received demands grace extended. If you've met my son, you know that he loves soccer. He loves nothing else right now except soccer. It's all he does. And there is no greater pride for an 11-year-old boy that likes soccer than going to Dick's Sporting Goods and standing in front of their magnificent wall of soccer balls. The only thing greater is being able to purchase one of those balls. But imagine purchasing one of those balls as an 11-year-old boy and taking it home and leaving it in the box up on the corner of your dresser. See, grace becomes alive when you take the ball of grace out of the box and take it into the backyard and start playing with it. The ball is not worth less if you put it up on a shelf. You're just experiencing less of what was intended in the midst of this beautiful creation of grace. It's like being given wings but still choosing to crawl. See, grace is relational. It's a thing that we do with God. It's not transactional. Hear me, church. Many traditional understandings of grace depict it as something that God dispenses or withhold, like a divine currency exchanged for faith or good behavior. But instead, grace is the very nature of all of God's relationships. With us and with creation, it is not something God has, it is who God is. Grace is God's ongoing invitation to relationship. Grace isn't static, but it's in motion, luring us towards healing and wholeness and love. It's not merely forgiveness, but it's the empowering presence of God working within and through all of creation. In this sense, grace is less about God making up for our deficiencies and more about God working within us toward the transformation of all things. Imagine, if you will, a dance instead of a courtroom. Traditional views of grace often describe it as God clearing our record. This is a legal metaphor. But I invite you to see grace as more like a dance where God is continually moving with us, adapting to our choices and leading us toward more and more beauty. Imagine being the 7th grade boy standing at the edge of the school dance, waiting to be invited in. And this is grace. God comes and invites us to move. Have you ever danced with somebody who makes you look good? It's nothing like it. And this is what God's grace does in our life. It shapes and it moves us, and we begin to move with it. And in this divine dance, we begin to see and understand a whole new way of moving in our lives and in our communities and in our neighborhood and in our world. And then we begin to invite people into the dance. You ever been to that wedding where nobody's dancing and it just takes that one person who's not afraid? This is what God's grace does in us. It doesn't control us. Grace is not a one-sided divine action. Instead, it requires our participation. It's always being extended to us, but we're invited to respond and collaborate, which sometimes means that grace isn't a quick fix. but a process of becoming. Grace invites our creativity, our choices, our engagement in the work of healing and renewal. It moves through relationships, not just between God and us, but among people, shaping communities and invigorating love and justice. It's like an ecosystem, not a vending machine where you receive grace by pushing the right buttons, but instead an ecosystem where everything is connected and grace is flowing through participation and nature and care. See, God isn't distant. He's not a judge up there like Zeus throwing down lightning bolts at us, handing out grace from afar. But God is a present companion who suffers with us and works through our pain. And grace doesn't erase suffering, but it moves through it and with it. It doesn't fix everything instantly, right? When Jesus rewrote the story of that woman, she's still left there with people whispering about who she was. But she began to understand herself differently. It doesn't fix everything, but it walks with us toward hope. Grace is God's solidarity with the hurting and the oppressed and the lonely. Think of grace as the friend sitting beside you in the hospital rather than someone who just pays your medical bill. Thomas Ort says that God's grace is most powerfully experienced in presence, companionship, and in co-suffering love. It's not just a theological concept. Grace is the very energy of God's love moving through our universe. It's uncontrolling. It's participatory. It's transformational. It's relational. And it's persistent. Grace never gives up. It never runs out. It never stops working on us. It's not a ticket out of trouble, but it's a divine movement that draws us towards wholeness and love and justice. And hear me, church. That grace is available right now, in this moment, calling us to something deeper, something truer, something more alive. It's when we tap into this grace, we begin to understand for the first time what Jesus says when he says, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. A life that is not being defined by your past and in your worst moments, but a life that is being defined by who God is in you. So here's the question. Where is grace calling you to let go? Where is grace inviting you to allow your story to be rewritten? Maybe it's in yourself. Maybe you're carrying something that Jesus has already forgiven and you need to set it down. Or maybe it's someone else. Maybe there's someone who's hurt you, someone who's wronged you, and grace is calling you to release them and yourself from the prison you're keeping yourselves in. See, grace doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending things didn't happen. It doesn't even mean no longer being responsible. It means choosing freedom over resentment. It means letting love have the last word. It means freeing yourself from the pains of sin that you've done and the sins done to you. Grace may look like years of therapy to undo chaos. Grace may look like significant work on ourselves, but it starts with a moment of redefinition. The woman at the dinner party walked in with a reputation, but she left with a new identity. The unforgiven servant was given freedom, not because he refused to extend it, but because he refused to extend it, he walked himself back into his own prison. That's the thing about grace. It is always an invitation. So the question is, will you say yes to the dance? Will you let it shape you? Because grace isn't fair. It's better. And it's ours. Please pray with me. Gracious God, like a bunch of seventh graders at a dance, we long to belong. We long to be called out into the dance. May we hear you. May we move with you. May we be awakened to what it looks like to play our lives to the song of your grace.